But first, here's my take. The Paris terror attacks were barbaric, but also startling, leading many to ask, what could be done to prevent this kind of terrorism in the future? Well, one man has a clear answer. That attack you saw in Paris, you'll see an attack in the United States, Senator John McCain told the New York Times. Elaborating on how to stop this from happening, he explained to the Times and to CNN that it would require a more aggressive American military strategy across the greater Middle East, with a no-fly zone and ground troops in Syria and more troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. This theory was sometimes described during the Iraq War as, quote, "We fight them there so we don't have to fight them here," unquote. It was wrong then, and it's wrong now. Other politicians and commentators have noted that many jihadis have connections to the new badlands of the Middle East, places like Yemen and Syria, where order has collapsed, a civil war is underway, and Islamic terror groups have staked out safe havens. This is the blowback from the chaos in Syria. It has become conventional wisdom that if only Washington had gotten more involved there earlier, we would be safer. But what do the jihadis themselves say? Well, CNN reports that in a 2007 court deposition, Sharif Kouachi, one of the Paris terrorists, made clear the source of his radicalization. Quote, "I was ready to go and die in battle," he said. "I got this idea when I saw the injustices shown by television on what was going on over there in Iraq. I am speaking about the torture that the Americans have inflicted on the Iraqis." End quote. So in the actual case of the French terrorist, it was American intervention in the Middle East that caused him to become a jihadi. But apparently, more intervention would somehow have had the opposite effect. The scholars Robert Pape and James Feldman have analyzed all cases of suicide bombs from 1980 to 2009 and concluded that the vast majority of the terrorists behind these attacks were acting in response to American intervention and involvement in the Middle East rather than out of a religious or ideological motivation. In their book, Cutting the Fuse, Pape and Feldman note that the only spectacular Western plots after 9/11, the Madrid and London bombings, were, quote, "specifically inspired by the invasion of Iraq," unquote. Let's review the record. America's non-intervention in Bosnia in the early 1990s is said to have produced Islamic radicalism, as did the interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 2000s, as did the partnership with Pakistan's military, as did the drone strikes against Pakistan and Yemen, as did the surge in Afghanistan, as did the withdrawal of troops from that country. To argue that the only way to stop terrorism at home is for the United States to intervene militarily and stabilize the many unstable parts of the Middle East is to commit Washington to a fool's errand for decades. The scholar Andrew Besovich has pointed out that before Syria, Washington had already launched interventions in 13 countries in the Islamic world since 1980. Will one more really do the trick? For more, go to cnn.com/Fareed and read my Washington Post column this week.